I most easily recognize the first signs of comparison in my life as a 5th and 6th grader. Now, obviously, I've always had freckles. It's nothing new. It does nothing for me when people stop while sitting next to me or something and they're like, whoa, you got a lot of freckles, as if they're some pioneer of the unknown, or as if I haven't actually seen myself in the mirror every day for the past 29, almost 30 years. Yikes to that. And I'm just gonna all of a sudden look down, and be like, whoa, oh my gosh, I had no idea. It does nothing for me. It's more funny than anything, but that wasn't always the case. You see, growing up, I was a kid who liked to have a lot of fun. Joy was something I was always seeking. I love to enjoy life. I love to discover new things, and I love to hit rocks into my neighbor's backyard that just so happened to be the crowd seated behind the left field wall in my imagination of my backyard. And my backyard was actually the Astrodome. I didn't have many cares in the world, and while I had a tough background that I was unknowingly living in at the time, I was happy with who I was. Then the first person to say, whoa, you got a lot of freckles, actually did bring that fact to my attention for the first time. My grandmother took a first attempt at saving it by saying, your freckles are actually angel's kisses from when you're asleep. And that made it negative 1,000 times better. And that's just weird. I actually started locking my door at night just in case that was true, because I had had enough, but thank you, angels. It actually ended up snowballing into a place where I wished I was someone else. And at times, anybody else. That seems like a drastic jump, but it was. There's a specific guy in my school I remember who, it didn't matter if it was July or it was December, he was just always tan. And I legitimately thought, if I was blessed with that instead of this, I'd be incredibly happy. The kid who was once incredibly confident would wear turtlenecks to school in 6th grade, and it didn't matter what season it was. It became a big insecurity and discouragement for me, all because I had always been looking at people around me, but I had never quite compared myself to them. And this brought that to my attention for the first time, this topic of comparison. And it was affecting my emotional health. I stopped even knowing anything about who I was or the gifts that I had. And I'll admit, I was a very gifted kid. And the only thing I knew about me is that I wish I didn't have what I had, and I wished I had what others had. And sure, you're like, Tyler, that's an example of when you were a kid. That's a very kiddish example. And you know what? I'll tell you, the thing is, there are very deep things that can be our focal point of comparison. You're in a world with social media at your fingertips 24/7, and things like Instagram that were once invented as a way to connect have now turned into a projection contest. And when I just had to live with my freckles as if, it were today, I could literally get an app, if it was today, on my phone and eliminate every blemish I didn't want to be there, and even have a picture pulled up on my laptop of somebody I wished I looked like that I could use as like a template to go off of while I changed myself. We even do things like compare someone's life on social media, which, by the way, are often highlight reels, to whatever state we're in at the time. And if asked in that moment, we would trade who we are without question to have that life and that appearance and that voice and that athletic ability and that popularity and that family and that 2-parent home and that ability to lead and that ability to make people laugh. In an instant, we can go from being incredibly happy in a complete state of emotional bliss to trading that person for this one without hesitation. Tonight, as we dive into this topic more in depth, the first thing I want us to look at when it comes to comparison, and I want you to hear this because it's very important, is that I think we often associate comparison with the self-dejection side of things. I'm not as attractive as they are, or I'm not as tall or as strong as they are, or I don't have the giftings or the talents that they do, or, the man, I wish my skin looked like theirs and mine wasn't covered with freckles. But there's a whole nother beast when it comes to this distraction and this destroyer of comparison. Comparison doesn't always just make you feel inferior. It can also cause you to feel superior. The pride aspect comes into play, right? Thank goodness I don't look like that. Or I can't imagine what it'd be like to be that unathletic, or to not be able to sing as good as I do. Thank goodness I'm smart enough to get the grades. I can't imagine being that person that gets straight C's every time it's some sort of accomplishment. Comparison often gets seen as the first, where you're having to build yourself back up, but it doesn't often get portrayed as the one that makes you have to bring yourself back down in humility. So here is the first truth I want to give you tonight, and just 2 truths. The first one is whether comparison makes you feel belittled or whether it makes you feel prideful, neither honors God. And while none of us are immune to at times feeling inferior and at times feeling superior, you're not exempt to either one of those. I do believe you may relate with one more and have a stronger leaning toward one more often. So here's how I want to help you. By giving you words from Scripture to cling on to memorize, to go back to pull from when you're tempted to feel either one of those feelings or think either one of those thoughts that don't honor God. So get your pen ready. If you relate more to the first, where your temptation is to discount or curse the gifts that and the life that God has given you in lieu of wishing he'd given you the gifts in the life of someone else, here's a verse I want you to write down. And it comes from 1 Peter 4, 8 through 10. And it says, above all, keep loving one another earnestly. Since love covers a multitude of sins, show hospitality to one another without grumbling. As each has received a gift, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied grace. Here's a thought I really want you to think on. Have you been so focused on the longing of someone else's gifts that you aren't even sure what yours are? Because if this verse is true, and plot twist, it is, you have received a gift. And you haven't just received the gift for you, you've received the gift that you're supposed to be using to impact and to serve those around you. So let me rephrase the question again. Have you been so focused on the longing of someone else's gifts that you've been withholding yours from the people around you? Your community and the body of believers as a whole is better, it's stronger, it's more served when you know the gifts that the Lord has given you and you're using them to serve and to love others. And if you relate more to the second, right, where your temptation is to dismiss the gifts in the lives of others in lieu of elevating yours in a way that causes you to forget you're not the one who gave yourself those gifts in the first place, here's a verse I want you to write down. And it's Daniel chapter 2, verse 20 and 21. It says this, Daniel answered and said, blessed be the name of God forever and ever, to whom belong wisdom and might. He changes times and seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. It's a reminder that everything, including the seasons, is under the control and the might of God. He's overall removing kings, bringing kings to power. Every bit of wisdom and knowledge is from him. It's a reminder that any gift you have, you didn't give it to yourself. And not only could it be removed, should he say so, he also is good and gracious to call you to a plan and a purpose he wants to use those for. And guess what? Outside of yourself, he's also been good and gracious to give a plan and purpose and gifts to everyone around you. And just because they look different than yours or may not garner as much attention, it doesn't mean that their calling is any less than yours. And vice versa, it doesn't mean that your calling is any greater. And it's good to remind ourselves of that. The best way to honor God on this topic is to know your gifts and to know what they're there for. And they're not to boost your status or elevate your following. They're also not for you to cheapen by wishing you could trade them in. Your gifts are power in comparison, whether by a way that causes you to feel inferior or by a way that causes you to feel superior. It distracts you from that power and it hinders it.